Hello again, this is Bill Lindeman. I'm here with Mike Cyber. This is the Blue Seahorse Show. And now, this week, we're going to have part 2 of a series called Perception. And wouldn't you know, the biggest story in the news right now domestically is what's happening in Ferguson, Missouri, a suburb of St. Louis. And it's the perception of the two sides of what happened. And boy, is it different. And that's a perfect example of what we're talking about, perception. So, Mike, you want to take it from here?
Okay, Bill.
All right.
I know last week we got excited towards the end of the show, and we were out of time.
Mm-hmm.
So we decided to come back and do the show, finish up the show, which is, hopefully we can finish it tonight. Maybe we're going to
Sure.
have part 3, you never know.
Sure.
But I'm going to start out with the perception of what I read in the beginning last week,
All right.
just to get started. It says, when you change the way you look at things, the things you look at change.
Mm-hmm.
And Ferguson, Missouri is going to be a good example of that.
Mm-hmm.
It's how people are perceiving what happened before getting all the information.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
It's got to be a scary situation down there, and I'm glad I'm not there.
Mm-hmm.
This follows on to say, how many of us judge a person or situation by how they look without taking the time to get to know them?
Mm-hmm.
Again, the perfect situation down there of what's going on.
Mm-hmm.
We all know eventually the truth will come out.
Mm-hmm.
And we're going to find out what's going on. Some people are going to be disappointed by the truth because
Sure.
their perception of what they perceive they want to have happen
Mm-hmm.
won't be the truth.
Mm-hmm.
And how do you deal with that when you've made such a verbal and vocal and violent statement
Mm-hmm. Yes.
to come to find out you were wrong
Mm-hmm.
and the whole thing was wrong? Or the people on the other side who are defending the situation come to find out they're wrong,
Mm-hmm.
that this thing should never have happened, the situation got out of control and the wrong decision was made,
Mm-hmm.
and now there's been, 2 weeks of rioting, looting. Why do people perceive that because there's a riot you can steal?
Mm-hmm.
Where does that perception come from?
Uh-huh.
This is a huge topic, and I got to be honest with you, starting out this conversation with a little chapter I wrote in the book,
Mhm.
which is 2 pages long, I did not anticipate
Sure.
the in-depth of this conversation.
Yes.
And maybe that's my naivety, I'm not sure. But I did a little bit more research, and we read some more stuff about perception,
Mm-hmm.
and I'm going to read some of it from here.
Sure.
So there was a psychologist, James Berner, has developed a model of perception. According to him, people go through the following process just to form an opinion.
Mm-hmm.
When we encounter an unfamiliar target, we are open to different information, cues, and want to learn more about the target.
Mm-hmm.
If everybody wanted to learn more about a new situation,
Mm-hmm.
we probably wouldn't have the situation we have.
Okay.
But they form their opinion at that point, number one,
Uh-huh.
and then they stop wanting to know more information.
Mm-hmm.
All right? I don't want to know anymore because it may not suit what I think.
Mm-hmm.
Number 2, in the second step, we try to collect more information about the target.
Mm-hmm.
Gradually, we encounter some familiar cues that will help us categorize the target. So now we're getting a little bit more information, and we're putting them into categories.
Mm-hmm.
Now we're starting to put things in boxes, and once we do that, we sort of stop listening,
Okay.
and we stop looking.
Right.
Number 3, at this stage, the cues become less open and less selective.
Mm-hmm.
Now they're in the boxes. We don't want to know anymore, because then we got to put into another box, and we don't want to do that.
Right. Mm-hmm.
We try to search for more cues that confirm the categorization of our already made up opinion.
Mm-hmm.
So now we're looking for information to support our opinion.
Mm-hmm.
So now we've perceived what we think happened. Now we're looking for information to support that.
Yeah.
Not to question it, not to challenge it,
Mm-hmm.
but to support it.
Mm-hmm.
That's scary. And we all do it.
Yeah.
We also actively ignore and even distort the cues that violate our initial perceptions. So we'll take the information that's coming in and twist it to meet our own needs, to meet what we want to see, what we want to have happen. And we at this stage today, we really don't know the truth about what happened down there. We'll eventually find it out.
Yeah.
But I know, because of behaviors, which is what I do, that there are some people down there that want it to be what they think. And they will twist, manipulate, turn. Even the proof coming from the unbiased people, the doctors who do the autopsies, they'll twist that. You know, and race is going to play a big part in that. Now, what would happen if all the people who do the autopsies were all African American, and they all come back and said the cop was right, the victim was wrong? How does that impact all the people that want it to be the other way?
Sure.
I don't know what's going to happen down there. We know in the end it'll all calm down, and it may leave a sore spot in that community for generations to come. Hopefully the truth will come out and not everybody's going to form a negative opinion of the community and the people down there.
An interesting thing comes to mind, that even years later, people were going to stick to what they believe, what they think happened. A good example of that is the assassination of President Kennedy.
Yeah.
There are people who are sure it's a conspiracy, and others are equally sure it was only Oswald. And it remains to this day, after all those years, it remains to this day, 50 years later, you know.
And that's people's perception of government, of politics, of, because it was an assassination of a president. You know, I was there. I was in '63 when it happened.
Okay.
I think it was '63. I was in the Navy at the time.
November '63, yes.
Yeah, I was in the Navy at the time, on board a submarine. We all prepared for war.
Yeah, sure.
I mean, that was the first thing that came down. Was we started getting food on board, and because nobody knew. This is like hours after it happened.
Sure.
You know, when the president gets assassinated in any country, military goes on alert. So we were on alert too. You know, like you said, there are people out there today, to this day, that are going to believe it was a plot.
And writing books about it.
Oh yeah, and selling them.
Yeah.
Well, I guess more power to them, but they do nothing but feed the fever, feed the frenzy. The final section of this sentence says, our perception becomes more selective when we finally paint a consistent picture of that target.
Okay.
So now we've perceived what we thought happened. We've manipulated the facts in our mind, or the information, not facts, because facts, it's hard to manipulate facts, but people can do it.
Sure. Yeah.
We've manipulated the information to suit our needs.
Yeah.
We've now put everything into a box that this is what happened, and that's our opinion. And far be it from somebody to tell me that my box needs to get opened and I've got to rethink. Now, young people are more emotional than most of the older generation, because they're prepared to say, you know what, a lot of things aren't what they used to be. Well, now we can deal with change.
Sure.
You would think it'd be the other way around. Young people can deal with change because the world is changing so fast. Technology and everything that's going on today. And the older people get set in their ways, and I'm not going to do this, and this is the way it used to be, and blah, 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 blah. But I'm finding it's actually becoming the opposite. The younger people are directionally orientated, and they don't like change too much. They have an opinion of where they want to go, and that's it, or what they think is happening, and watching the TV is disheartening with that Ferguson that's going on there. Okay, another section of this is, according to another doctor, Alan Sachs and Gary Jones, there are three components to perception. One is the perceiver, the person who becomes aware about something and comes to a final understanding. There are three factors that can influence his or her perceptions. One is experience, one is a motivational state, and finally the emotional state. In different motivational and emotional states, the perceiver will react to or perceive something in different ways. Also, in different situations, he or she might employ a perceptual defiance, where they tend to see what they want to see.
Yeah.
Now we're back to what we talked about before.
Mm-hmm.
It's emotional states, it's motivational states, and the experience is that it was a race thing. And it's always a shame when a white policeman shoots an African American person, or vice versa. Doesn't seem to be as bad vice versa, but it is bad. There's not as much reaction to it. But I can understand a lot of the history of why they're so defensive and why it's us again. Why us? Why us? Why us? I can understand that. They've been persecuted for years and years and years. So why would they think any different?
Yeah.
Again, it's perception. Is there a chance, did anybody sit back and say, wait a minute, let's get the facts before this becomes a riot? Before this gets out of control? No, they didn't. They perceived what they wanted to perceive. They saw what they wanted to see, and it suits their needs. And the sad part about that is, it was noted today, I watched the news this morning, that of the 40, I think it was 43 or 40-something number of people arrested, 13 or 15 of them were out-of-staters. Well, what are they doing in that riot? What are they doing there to start with? Why are they involved?
Right.
It's really got nothing to do with them. So their involvement, and one of them was apparently arrested 3 times over the last week.
Sure.
So he or she, I don't know, they didn't say what he or she is coming back, starting more trouble. Well, that gives the viewers the perception around the United States that that community is out of control. And there are some people there that I believe are really hurt emotionally because of it. There are people there trying to control the situation. They're not, and the agitators, if there are agitators there. The perception again is that there are agitators. Everything we're doing is perception.
Sure.
The perception,
So true. Yeah.
the perception is that there are agitators down there deliberately keeping the flame alive, rather than trying to put it out. If that's true, that's even worse. Number 2 of the 3 components is the target. This is the person who is being perceived or judged. Ambiguity or lack of information about the target leads to a greater need for interpretation and addition. So the person they're talking about, which would, this time would be the policeman,
Yeah.
the perception of him, I don't know, I wouldn't want to read some of the stuff people are saying about him. And we don't know what really happened. That's the sad part about this. And it's easy for you and me to sit here, a long ways away from Missouri, being open-minded, because it doesn't affect us. I don't know what would happen. I mean, I'm from a little village of Decatur. I don't know what would happen if this was taking place in my town. Because I have a lot of family there, I'm from there, I have a lot of friends there. And even not, I don't want to see my town destroyed. So how would I perceive what's happening?
Yeah.
Would I be as rational as I am sitting here right now? Would I be this calm and cool?
Yeah, it can open wounds that can remain for generations, I suppose, at its worst, you know.
And it's again emotional, because once I'm the target, as the policeman is, his emotions have got to be running riot.
Well, again, with the Kennedy assassination, you actually had motion picture film of the actual killing shot. And without that, I can imagine what speculation would be. And even with it, it doesn't seem to do any good.
Doesn't change
People are
anything.
going to perceive what they want to perceive, you know. Oh, it came from this direction. No, it came from that direction.
Well, what they only talked about in all the years since and I haven't watched everything because sometimes you get tired of seeing it, but is what they only mentioned in one episode I saw years and years ago was everybody apparently was leaned and looked towards the grassy knoll, and they say that was the echo. They heard the shot.
Sure, it's probably the echo.
And that was the echo, and everybody went towards the echo.
Yeah.
And it wasn't the shot at all. The shot
That's a good point. That's a good point, sure.
So,
Yeah.
but that's never been, I've never heard it mentioned again or ever seen it written. Not that I read a lot
But you're
about
right.
it.
It's an enclosed plaza, and it had, elevated, that's what they call the grassy knoll, is elevated section. Sure, the sound would bounce back.
And that's what they think happened,
Yeah.
is why the conspiracy got so out of hand, because most of the people were looking towards the echo.
Well, I think the conspiracy got out of hand because people they felt a need for the conspiracy. They have to have an answer as to why it happened. I find, just briefly, the fact that one gunman at that distance to be that lethal is really astounding. I mean, it's a little hard to believe, but, it's
Well,
the way it is. That's one of the reasons why people just don't want to believe it,
And that's why you get back to the perception again.
Yeah, perception.
But
sure.
also, apparently, they've done the shot again, and it can be done. And the marksman.
Well, I can remember people saying it can't be, so, again, it's perception. And I think the same thing is going to be played out in Ferguson, the same thing, years from now. It's going to, they keep on repeating the same stuff over and over again. No, I believe this, no, I believe that,
Well, like you're saying now, when the truth comes out, whatever that may be,
Yeah.
there are people who are not going to believe it.
Well, that's because they think it's not true.
Yeah, their
It's
perception
perception.
is that it's a conspiracy.
It's not true, right?
That they've
Yeah.
shoved it under the carpet, and whatever is not going to happen is not going to happen. And wow. Number 3 on this components to perception is the situation also greatly influences perceptions because different situations may call for an additional information about the target. So you get feedback from different people. And even two people standing side by side will have a different perception about what happened.
Exactly, that's what's happened already.
And
Yeah, sure.
what a subject to talk about when, and I don't talk much about this in my book with my counseling,
Sure.
but I should more we're talking about it now. I think it needs to be a larger topic of life skills for people not to jump to conclusions. And we always said that, and you've heard that when you were a kid, and I've heard it all my life. Don't jump to conclusions. Do your research. Do your research.
Sure.
Well, it's hard when emotions are involved. Now, that's easy to say in a classroom setting. Do your research. Don't jump to conclusions. Your first answer is normally close, but maybe not right. That's fine for research people.
Yeah.
But now you're to an emotional state and a personal state. How do you form your opinions and still react and still stay calm when there's life and death involved? And now there's people getting hurt, stealing stuff. The shop owners, their perception is that it's a mob out of control. It doesn't matter. It's an excuse to steal my stuff from my store.
Yeah, it's a shame that people have been in business for years and years and years, and now it's all being jeopardized. All the work, it can disappear overnight. All the work they've done, their fortunes, their retirement,
Yeah.
could all be gone.
And the perception of the people doing the stealing and the rioting is just part of the deal. And I hope I'm not being so callous about this, and and we're probably going to get some feedback from this show. I hope we do.
Yeah.
I hope we do, and I hope some people want to be invited on it to correct me or challenge me on my thought processes, because that's the only way we learn, is open, honest discussion.
Yeah.
If you can maintain your ethics and morals and your integrity, then I think a lot of this stuff wouldn't happen. You're still going to get perception, but where do you stop when it comes to physical violence or emotional violence with a perception? Do we take time to do the research, to ask more questions? And this is what I think I'm going to try and incorporate here in the future in some of the family stuff that I do, is getting the parents to give that process to the children. As it said in the beginning of the book, when you look at things differently, things you look at change. And we don't do that.
Well, in your work as a therapist, I mean, you've devised little dramas and little tricks to show how people's perceptions can be different, and the stuff that you do, and I can see you using something like this to advantage to teach people. How you can. I'll bet you can get a group of people right in front of us right now and do something and have wildly different opinions on what you did.
Oh yeah, and I do it all the time. You've seen some of them.
Yes.
And I like doing that. And I'd love to do it on the show if we can get some people up
Sure.
here or wherever we're going to go and film it somewhere else.
Yeah.
Because there are some interesting episodes that come out of that. And when you're dealing with a family, and I do some of these activities that I do with families, the perception of the children is different than the perception of the adults. And the perception of mom is different than the perception of dad. And it's interesting to see the dynamics and who tries to be right. And dad usually tries to be right because he's dad, and he's got the loudest voice, and he's the biggest person in the room. Sometimes you get some moms that say, you know what? I'm right. I don't care how big you are or how loud you shout, I'm right. And the kids, a lot of times their perception, because they're so young and their opinions aren't formed yet, and they're still open-minded about a lot of things in the world, a lot of times their perception's more accurate than the parents.
Sure.
Because the parents form judgment real quick, form the perception, make a judgment, put it in a box, and close the door. Where kids are still trying to get information.
Yeah, that's right.
And they're still trying to get information. Their box is still wide open.
Sure.
And that's difficult a lot of times for parents to think, well, maybe, in this particular little game or exercise, the kids know more than we do. Because they're prepared to say, why didn't we try it that way? Why didn't we try it this way? I work with a guy every now and then who is a very successful businessman. He came from nothing. His family was poor, put himself through school, put himself through college. It was a very successful dentist. He's retired now. Fortunate enough that we became friends years ago, and he buys and sells airplanes like you and I would buy and sell a car. Okay?
Yeah.
He's got that kind of money. But he's also so opinionated that he drives people nuts. And him and I talk a lot. And I get him alone, I tell him what I think of him sometimes. Because he cannot be corrected. And he will embarrass you in public. Because his perception of the conversation or what should be done or how it should be done is the only one he'll listen to.
And being successful in life, at least financially successful, it'll just encourage him.
Oh, it supports that.
Sure.
Supports his whole thing.
Yeah.
And he's got luckily I can talk to him and he listens.
Yeah.
So I don't make him too mad. But then he challenges me on some of my stuff too sometimes. But still, he is like that, and he goes back into that mode every now and then he'll call me up and we'll talk, and he'll be out of it for a while, but he'll go back into that mode because he worked hard, and from a young man all the way through, he was his own boss. and he did everything his way, and it was right. I'm sure he stepped on a few toes along the way.
A few dead bodies.
There may be a few around the corner, but when a person is like that, and there's a lot of them out there today that are successful in their own way, in their own right, who weren't given the money, they weren't trust fund babies,
Sure.
they weren't all this kind of stuff. They're right because of their opinion and their perception of the market, of their job or their situation or their environment, and they're right, and they have to be right because people support them
Right.
when they're right. Those kind of people sometimes are really hard to deal with.
Yeah. Yeah.
And he's retired now, and now he's even a grouchy old man, so he's even harder to deal with.
Yeah.
But he's a good friend,
Sure. Yeah.
and we talk a lot. And I just saw him about 2 weeks ago. So, but again, it gets back to perception. My perception of him is that. His perception of me is his perception, whatever that is. Sometimes he tells me, sometimes he doesn't.
Sure.
But he's a nice guy, and he has a heart of gold. But don't mess with his perception of the environment.
Yeah.
If it's from cooking a steak to tying a knot, his right is the only way. So we get back to perception on raising children. A lot of people's adults and young parents is their parents' way. Their parents, they perceive from their parents that I turn out okay. You know, my parents raised me. Sure, there was some discipline in the family and blah, 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 and all this kind of stuff, and Dad got drunk every now and then, but I came out okay.
Yeah.
So my parents' way of raising children, to my perception, is okay.
Yeah.
So they raise their children the same way. But I know, and you know, today, the legal system has changed. And Child Protective Services don't allow a lot of spanking going on in the homes. And you might have a young boy or young girl cuss the mother out in the morning for whatever reason, because kids do that to see where they can go, test the boundaries. Mom slaps her across the face for cussing at her. She goes to school with little fingerprints on her mouth.
Sure.
Next thing, Mom's arrested.
Yeah.
Well, I'd hate to think the number of times I went to school with handprints on my mouth.
Right. Yeah.
Because I tested the boundaries a lot.
Yeah. Yeah.
My mom would be in jail forever. But today you can't do the stuff that our parents did. You know, behind the woodshed therapy, that doesn't work anymore. It should, you know, I'm not saying it should be allowed or not, but you just can't do that anymore.
Yeah.
So perception of young adults raising children has to be looked at. And they have to be prepared to look at today's environment, today's growth,
Yeah.
different from their parents and the environment their
Yeah,
parents
yeah.
were in. You know, we have one family cars. Today it's two family cars or three family cars. You know, the perception is different. Mom working. Mom stayed at home when I was young.
It's a big subject.
Yeah.
We're running out of time.
Okay. Well, and that's what we talk about, perception again.
Yeah.
And I think there's not enough attention paid to it in the family. I don't think there's enough talking going on between parents and kids to make awareness of you need to think and ask questions before you make your mind up and perceive what you think is the truth, and it may not be.
Okay, well, that's a good statement to end on. So we may or may not have a Perception Part 3 next week. But this is Bill Lindeman with Mike Cyber and the Blue Seahorse Show. We'll see you next week. Thanks a lot.
Thanks, Bill.
Okay.